Right now, though, we do our own little Odyssey rewind, if you will. If you want the full interview with Kurt Warner, the NFL Hall of Famer, and Kevin Sheehan, you can rewind on Sheehan's show in the free Odyssey app, or, of course, check Kevin's podcast feed. But a couple of bites that we wanted to play for you here on the Hoffman Show from what the Hall of Famer had to say. Warner, we cannot bury the lead here. We can just go ahead and say Warner did have the guy that he would take number 2 overall, the Commanders. For him, he says he would take Jayden Daniels.
It's hard to say. Like, we saw Joe Burrow do that, right? He had the one great year, and he is that guy. So I want to believe that Jayden Daniels just kind of came into his own, figured out who he was, the whole game came together, and we're going to get that at the next level. So I want to believe that. I think the other thing is just the stature of him, running around, moving, even though he's more of a pocket passer and then, runs when he has to. Can you withstand the pounding week in and week out at the NFL level? But on tape, I would say that would be my choice, that I would go with Jayden Daniels. And again, I don't sit down in a room with them. I don't get to talk to him from that capacity. But on tape, I thought he had the best tape from last year that would excite me enough to go, geez, I can't pass that guy. I got to at least see if this is the guy he is for his career.
And I get that. I think what's interesting about Warner there is he says, and actually what we're going to hear from Warner in general, and I will play into the different parts of this as we go and talk about where maybe he and I differ. And I realize that is a ridiculous statement. I'm a talk show host. I've covered the league. Like, I don't know nothing, but he's Kurt Warner. So there is that. I understand that when I disagree with Kurt Warner, a lot of you are going to be like, okay, cool, shut up, idiot. He's Kurt Warner and you're you. And you want to know what? I hear you. But I do think it underlines how evaluators all value different things. And some of the things that I care about more are things that Kurt Warner cares about less. And there are plenty of NFL GMs that agree with me. There are also plenty of NFL GMs that agree with Kurt Warner, and quarterbacks coaches that agree with Kurt, and quarterbacks coaches that agree with me. What I appreciate about Kurt's analysis is I don't disagree with a lot of the substance of it. Sometimes I watch guys on tape and I hear an analyst who I respect, and I just go, yeah, I don't see it that way. You see this, I see that. One of us is probably right, but maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. Maybe it's me, maybe it's you. I don't know. But I do agree with a lot of what Kurt Warner said there about Jayden Daniels. So to recap, he says he's got the best 2023 tape in the class. That is true. Jayden Daniels, if you just were to say, go watch the 2023 tape, and you tell me which guy you want to draft, and you don't give any evaluator, like they were, you got a guy who was frozen in 2018, and I picked 2018 instead of like 1988 because the league is so different than it was. You show someone from 1988 who's been frozen this tape, and they're like, what aliens are playing this sport now? But someone relatively recent, they have no file on any of these guys, and you just show them the 2023 tape, and you go, you need to tell me based off this tape who you take at number 1. It is Jayden Daniels, and it is a no-brainer. But these things require context. And that gets into what you see from Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, J.J. McCarthy, etc. And for me, the context that I think makes it difficult for me to just jump on Jayden as the obvious, no debate choice at number 2, even if I might still honestly land there by the end of the process, is he was buttressed by an offensive line that has multiple NFL players on it, including a guy at left tackle who's going to be a top 10 pick next year in the eyes of many evaluators. I heard Daniel Jeremiah say that today, so he's one of them. He was on Mina Kimes' podcast. By the way, surprise mid-show announcement here. Mina Kimes is going to join Take Command next week, so that's cool. If you're not subscribed to that, get on board. But DJ said, he's got like 3 or 4 NFL offensive linemen, and the left tackle is going to be a top 10 pick next year. He's also got 2 first-round wide receivers, other receivers who might wind up being pros. Like, Jayden Daniels had the easiest job in a lot of ways of these top 6, 7 quarterbacks that we're evaluating here. He constantly had better players than his opponent. He and his team outmanned the other side on the offensive side of the ball. Obviously, LSU's defense was not great, thus their record not as good as you would think with that offense. And when you look at like the Joe Burrow comparison, they cruised to a national title because they were sick not only on offense, but on both sides of the ball. Meanwhile, you have guys like Drake Maye and Caleb Williams, who in 2022, when they had some better talent, had a couple of more NFL guys, looked like generational level prospects. And in 2023, they're hard to evaluate because they're constantly under pressure. Their receivers never win. They're constantly playing against teams that have better talent than them outside of them themselves. And their defenses were also terrible. And so it seemed like every time they took the field, they were down. And that context really matters in the evaluation, and how you weigh those factors is going to shape who you think the Commander should take at number 2, whether you're a fan or you're the guy who actually has to make the pick in Adam Peters. And speaking of announcements, if you missed us earlier, we'll find out first because I'm going to Detroit. We are taking the show to Detroit. That was announced at the top of the show today, so really excited for that coming up on April 25th. So will it be Jayden Daniels, like Kurt Warner would lean at this point in the process, or will it be, say, Drake Maye? Here's Warner on Maye.
I understand why there's an allure there, and you see some incredible throws, and you love the body type, and and he had a great 2 years ago, 22, not as good this last year. I just thought there was a number of technical flaws in his game this year, and even some last year, that just make me pause, because if you're not technically sound, I don't care what level you're playing at, you're going to miss, and you're going to have issues, and you're going to have times where you miss layups. And you can't miss layups at the NFL level. You have to be able to make those things most of the time. And so you got to be ready. You got to play fast, and you got to have technique. Yeah, is that something you can clean up? I think Josh Allen's a great example of, as he's cleaned up his technique, he's become one of the best quarterbacks our league has seen. And so it can be corrected. It's just, to me, when you see it as much as I saw it on tape, it worries me that if I get that guy and I can't get it corrected and we can't tighten that up, I'm going to have an inconsistent quarterback, year in and year out, and you can't win there. And so that's why I think if I'm picking, and I've got to make that choice based on what I saw on tape this past year, I'm going to go Jayden Daniels.
Kurt Warner and I on Drake Maye are in the exact same spot. The fundamentals that are flawed scare the daylights out of me with Drake Maye. Now, where he and I differ is I might still take him number 2 anyway. Because, like he said, if you can clean that stuff up, and I'm trusting between Cliff Kingsbury and Brian Johnson and everybody else that's here, you could clean that up because you have a great quarterback coaching staff. You could have a top 5 quarterback ultimately in the NFL. He's a guy that's handled a lot mentally. He's called protections at the line. He's shown an ability, even in North Carolina's let's call it anti-critically acclaimed offense, critically panned. Most evaluators watch that offense and go, this is one of the worst schematic offenses I've ever seen. He showed an ability within that offense with what he was asked to do to read stuff out. The other thing about the fundamentals piece is he was better in 22 on that stuff when he had more trust in what was around him. And I heard Daniel Jeremiah talking about this with Mina on her show earlier today, that with Caleb and Drake both, when they had the ability to trust the pieces around them in 2022, the results, the process and the results were better. And what happened is you could watch game over game, drive over drive sometimes within games, the trust deteriorate, and thus them try to go into hero mode or them get sped up and kind of the fundamentals and mechanics break down as they were more or less focused on survival. And so that is the difficulty here in breaking down Drake versus Jayden specifically is one played exceptionally well in optimal circumstances and the other played extremely inconsistently in not even suboptimal, but really bad circumstances. Then there's what J.J. McCarthy had to deal with at Michigan, which is optimal circumstances for winning, and they sure did. They won a national title, but suboptimal circumstances for showcasing your talent for the NFL draft. And in some ways, for quarterback development, which led to a pretty interesting problem. Here's Warner.
There's a lot there to like, and I understand why people are excited about him. He shows the ability to make big throws. Obviously, he was a winner, which is so important, as we talked about before, being a winner and bringing a winning mentality to something, playing in a system that does a lot more pro-style stuff, whether that's being under center, the play actions, the throws down the field. All of that stuff is good. For me, he only kind of has one speed when he throws it. He throws everything like a fastball. And so he missed a lot of throws, I thought, on tape because he didn't have the ability to change the pace of the football and change the trajectory and make it easier on the guys around him. And so when you have a guy like that, you either hit or you miss. And, so if you miss by 2 feet, you miss. If I miss by 2 feet throwing touch on the ball, my guy can adjust to it and make a catch. And so that's what you want. It's a guy that can understand how to throw all the different kinds of throws. Again, something that can be taught, but if you don't have it, you can struggle doing that early on.
And that's, again, a data point that is undeniable. The question is, and I think some of the disagreement about McCarthy specifically is, what do you do with that? For whatever it's worth, where I come down on that is, for McCarthy, it's not a red flag. It is if I draft him, put a pin in it, and we're going to work on this relentlessly. But it's not a red flag because his throw volume is so low. There are no, to me, red flags for McCarthy, like super duper red flags. Now, do I think he's going to be a top 5 guy? No. Do I think he could be a top 10 guy? Yes. It's going to depend on a lot of circumstances. But, and not even a lot of circumstances. It's going to depend on circumstances, but that's all these guys. Because he hasn't had a high throw volume, he hasn't had to problem solve in the way that these other guys have. And because he's 21 years old, won't turn 22 until after the season next year, because he's so young, because he's so inexperienced, and because he's so freaking smart and his mental stuff is elite, I trust that he can and would get better in that area. He already has. He showed the ability to layer throws at his pro day, and he has talked about how that is the thing that he really needs to work on. He is aware of it. He is actively working on it. We've already seen it get better. What will happen as he has to problem solve at the NFL level? And yes, will he get intercepted on some balls or have some balls tipped that shouldn't because he overthrows them as a rookie and instead of layering and having a little bit more touch? Probably. But if by the end of year 1 and into year 2 and into year 3, we see a much better quarterback because of that, because of those learning opportunities that he's given, all of a sudden you're looking at an insanely talented quarterback who could be one of the 10 best guys in the league and who absolutely knows how to do what it takes to win. He's done it in college, and I think that would translate real well to the NFL level. If you want the full interview with Kurt Warner and Kevin Sheehan, make sure you check out Kevin's podcast of the radio show. Just search Kevin Sheehan Show, and then pick the one that's got the Team 980 logo, because there's 2 Kevin Sheehan shows. They're both Kevin, just one's the radio show. Just that's the one you want for the interview with the Hall of Famer, Kurt Warner.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.